Hello, young lovers. No, I'm not singing the old Rodgers and Hammerstein song. I mean, hello, lovers of Neil Young. At least, I hope you love Neil Young because this video's all about him. I'm Benless. I have no Ben again, but don't worry, Ben's coming back. Now, Ben does like a bit of Neil Young, so hopefully, while he's sitting at home preparing to come back, getting ready to go back to work after his illness, he might enjoy watching this video, and he might not know some of these songs because he's not a Neil Young completist. In fact, very few of us are Neil Young completists, aren't we? There's always a few little hidden gems in the catalogue of artists like that because they've made so many records over the years. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look through 10 Neil Young albums, which I've picked at sort of a little bit randomly because there's so many of them, but I've picked out 10 hidden gems, individual tracks that I think are good and worth checking out if you've never heard them before. So shall we dive straight in? So we're going to start, we're not in any kind of chronological order here, we're starting in 1995 and the album is Mirrorball, and this is the album that he made with Pearl Jam. I think the story behind this is that Pearl Jam were fans of Neil Young, as many artists are, and they met him at some American award ceremony, and they discussed the idea of maybe making an album together, and he was obviously a fan of them. He liked them as the upcoming young band. And so this happened in 95. They got together over, I think it was only 2 or 3 days. It all happened pretty quickly. And they made this album, which is basically a Neil Young album. I think the problem they had contractually is that Columbia or Sony wouldn't allow Pearl Jam to be credited on a Neil Young album that came out on the Warner Group. So it is ostensibly a Neil Young album, but Pearl Jam is the backing band. There's a little bit of Eddie Vedder backing vocals on here as well, and he helped co-write some of the songs. But there's so many tracks on this that are good. I've always felt this is an underrated album. I think it works really well. Some people don't like Brendan O'Brien's production on this. They think it's a little bit muddy, but it's very much sort of in your face. Let's plug everything in and blast away with the guitars. The track I've chosen on here is called Big Green Country, and this really could have been a Neil Young and Crazy Horse thing, particularly with the lyrical concept behind this. But it's just an excellent track, I think. Great melody. Just a really good rock song to kick us off on our Neil Young journey of hidden gems. Next, I'm going to go to 1980 and the Hawks and Doves album, which I think the song I'm going to talk about, I'm not sure actually whether it comes from 1980, because some of the songs on this album were ones they had hanging around for a while. And I'm trying to pick here which one to go for, because there's a track on here called The Old Homestead, which is great. It goes on for nearly 8 minutes, and it's got Levon Helm of the band on drums, which is always a selling point. And that's one of these, very sort of cinematic Neil Young songs, lots of lyrics in it. You can listen to it late at night and it takes you on a trip. So I'm kind of torn between The Old Homestead, but then I'm thinking also the opening track on this album, which is only a couple of minutes long. It's called Little Wing. It's not the Jimi Hendrix song, although I think it's a nod to Jimi Hendrix because it's about a girl whose friends call her Little Wing, and presumably her friends have nicknamed her after the Jimi Hendrix song. But just a beautiful little melody, one of these really mellow Neil Young songs with just guitar and harmonica, and just lovely little tune, one of those little Neil Young hidden gems. So I'm settling on Little Wing. So let's get rocking again, shall we? And let's go to 1990s Ragged Glory with Crazy Horse. I remember once I was listening to this album at work at lunchtime, and one of the lads in the office I was working in at the time came and asked me what I was listening to. So I showed him the CD, because I had it on a little CD Discman, and he said, "I've never heard of them." It's that old thing, isn't it? You do come across people who've never heard of Neil Young, never heard of Crazy Horse, but we all have, haven't we? What am I going for from Ragged Glory? I'm going for Mansion on the Hill, which is, I mean, I think a lot of people would never have heard Mansion on the Hill. I think they played it live on the tour for this album, but I don't think it's popped up that often since, and I've never heard it on any radio station. Great little rocker about a mansion on the hill where psychedelic music fills the air, and nothing great. In terms of lyrics, it's no great Shakespeare. It's just a great rock tune. It's Neil Young, Crazy Horse, with their guitars plugged in, turned up to 11, and it's just got a great vibe to it. So Mansion on the Hill. And then also from the 90s, an album which I think is kind of underappreciated, but I kind of see why, because it's not a perfect album. It's this one. I nearly forgot what it was called then. Broken Arrow. It's a kind of weird album because it's only got there's 8 tracks on it, but the last track is Baby What You Want Me to Do. It's a live version that was recorded. It's pretty bootleggy in its quality. I think it was put on there as a memento of an event where Neil and Crazy Horse played live at some place outdoors in California, and a crowd of people came because they were playing live, and word got around. And I think that was recorded at this event, and I can't remember the background to that now. But a pretty good Neil and Crazy Horse album. It's an odd one because there's 3 long sort of jamming songs of the type we expect from Neil Young and Crazy Horse, and then there's some shorter little songs that are almost kind of throwaway in a way, but I quite enjoy them. But I'm going to pick as my hidden gem the 7th track on this, which is an acoustic number, just Neil solo, and it's called Music Arcade, and it's just a really great Neil Young acoustic song. There's so many of those, aren't there? My favourite lyric in this: I was walking down Main Street, not the sidewalk, but Main Street, dodging traffic with flying feet. That's how good I felt. It's a great one, so check out that if you haven't heard that before. Music Arcade. I realise that a lot of my tracks I've chosen here are quite mellow and quite atmospheric. For some reason, I do love Neil Young rocking out, particularly with Crazy Horse, but for some reason I've just settled here on 10 mainly quite mellow songs. And this one is from the very late 80s. It's from the album This Note's for You, which he recorded with a band called, well, at the time they were called the Blue Notes, and then they had to change the name because Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes threatened to sue them. So I think they renamed it 10 Men Working for subsequent editions of the album. But this is where he was kind of doing a sort of, I don't know how you describe it really, a kind of a bit of a Blues Brothers kind of thing, really, in a way. This sort of up-tempo rock soul with horns on it. And I'm going for one of the mellow songs on the album, and it's called, well, he calls it Coupe de Ville. Coupe, how do we pronounce it? Well, Neil pronounces it Coupe de Ville, so that's how I'm pronouncing it. A late night song with echoes of trumpet as well, and I've always really, really liked this track. Sometimes there's albums that you quite like. This isn't a bad album; it's an okay album. You can put it on and enjoy it. It's quite good fun if you're in the mood for it. But there's like one track that really grabs you for some reason, resonates with you, and you end up listening to that far more than any of the others. And that's how I am with that. I've never really got into, I must admit. This is Fork in the Road from 2000 and something. What year did this come out? 2009. This is an album that Neil Young made around the time that he was converting an old car. I think it might have been a Cadillac or something like that, some big old American car. He was having it it's a Lincoln. You can tell because he's got a Lincoln badge in here in there. But he was having it converted to be electric, or because Neil's quite into green stuff, isn't he? And he ended up writing an album about this car. I mean, it's just Neil Young, isn't it? I don't. I say I've never really got that much into the album. I felt it was a kind of, when I first played it, I kind of felt it was largely a pretty bad and almost forgettable Neil Young rock style album. But maybe I should give it another go. But there was one song that really stood out for me, and that is, again, it's another acoustic mellow song called "Light a Candle." Very, very good. There's something about the melody in this that reminds me slightly of another Neil Young song, and I can't think what it is. So maybe if you've ever heard "Light a Candle," or you go and check it out, I'd love to know if you think he may have partly plagiarized himself. But "Light a Candle" from Fork in the Road. We're still a bit mellow on this because we're in the mid 2000s. This album came out, I think, in 2005. It is Prairie Wind. There was a live performance of this album, or most of it, that was filmed by what was his name? Was it Jonathan Demme? Was he the one who did Silence of the Lambs? I think it was him that filmed the concert, unless I've got that totally wrong. I'm pretty sure it was him. And I've got that DVD. But I must admit, I haven't listened to the album massively, but it's a pretty good, mellow Neil Young album. It could be seen as, a follow-on from Harvest Moon. It's pretty mellow all the way through. The song on there that I really liked from the start, and I'm going to go for that, is "It's a Dream," which is a lovely ballad, lovely wistful ballad with some piano on there as well, and just one of those lovely Neil Young tunes. So "It's a Dream" from Prairie Wind. If you haven't heard that, you like mellow Neil Young, check out that one. Now here's an album that's quite, I think, largely unloved by most Young fans. It tends to go down near the bottom of these lists that people make, and that's "Are You Passionate?" Came out in 2002, I think. It contains his song that was inspired by the 9/11 attacks, or more specifically, the flight. Do you remember the flight where there were some passengers who tried to break down the door, tried to stop the hijackers, and it ended up crashing in a field? They fought with the hijackers, and he wrote a song called "Let's Roll," which is all about that. But that's not the one I've chosen. Most of this album is with Booker T, and Booker T on organ, from Booker T and the MGs, of course, Green Onions fame, and Donald Duck Dunn, the bassist from that band. They're on most of the album. There is a track with Crazy Horse, and there's a few tracks on this I like. I mean, it's one that I wouldn't recommend to anybody unless you're a diehard Neil Young fan. It's a little bit samey all the way through it. It's quite listenable, but I've always liked the track at the end of the album, "She's a Healer," goes on for, I think, about 10 minutes. It's just a bit of a jam with a bit of a vibe to it. I like that track, but in terms of the song, I'm going to go for the title track. I think it's a really good Neil Young song. It's buried in the middle of this album that gets a little bit samey, and so maybe it gets a bit lost. But if you play it on its own, I think it stands out very well. So "Are You Passionate?" by Neil Young is the 8th of my 10 Neil Young hidden gems. So for number nine, we're going to 2012, I think it was. And this one of the longest albums that he's made. I think it's nearly an hour and a half long in total, and that is "Psychedelic Pill." It's Neil Young and Crazy Horse. There's plenty of groovy 60s style stuff in here. You get a little booklet as well. 2 CDs. It came out as a double CD. I don't know how long the vinyl version is. Maybe it's 3 LPs. I'm not sure. But this is where Neil stopped smoking dope, and him and Crazy Horse were not spaced out in any way when they made this album, apparently, although it's called "Psychedelic Pill." And I think the clear-headedness made a bit of a difference, actually. There's something about this. It's a very good Neil Young and Crazy Horse album. It's long, and I think it probably take a long time to take the whole thing in. And there's 3 tracks on here that are more than 15 minutes long. In fact, there's one track that goes on for 27 minutes. You have to like a little bit of Crazy Horse guitar improvisation. But I'm going for a short, concise song on here, which I just love this song because in it, Neil relates the first time that he heard Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan. It's a song called Twisted Road, and the lyric is something like, first time I heard Like a Rolling Stone, I took that feeling and it carried me home. And there's something about words were rolling off his tongue like Hank Williams chewing bubble gum, asking me, how does it feel? And so he sort of sings the how does it feel from Like a Rolling Stone and incorporates it into this song. It's just really good. It's not too serious, but it's great fun rocking song, and it's a wonderful touching tribute, I think, to Bob Dylan's influence on him. So check that out if you've not heard that. Twisted Road, Neil Young. Now finally, I've got to choose this track. I could have chosen almost any track from Sleeps with Angels because I think the album is still a bit underrated by a lot of rock fans. A lot of people still haven't heard this album from 1994. I just really like this. It's one of those dark albums. I suppose it's got something in common with Tonight's the Night, the 70s classic, because it is quite dark. But I've always really liked the production of this by David Briggs. I think this was one of the last albums produced by Neil Young's long-term producer, David Briggs, who sadly died in the mid-90s. And I think he was perhaps the only person who could tell Neil Young that one of his ideas wasn't very good and that perhaps he should change things. And I think since then, quality control on his albums has not been quite the same since. But loads of interesting tracks on here, including Change Your Mind, which goes on for nearly 15 minutes. But the track on here, so I really like this album all the way through, but the track on here that I've always been a little bit obsessed with, and I can't totally explain to you why, but I think it's all to do with the guitar sounds and the way that they just use all the distorted guitars to play the melodies of this track. And it's one of those songs that I just don't get bored of. I'm just still intrigued by it to this day. That's the title song on here, Sleeps with Angels, which is a kind of tribute apparently to Kurt Cobain. This whole album was apparently a bit of a reaction to the suicide of Kurt Cobain, whom Neil Young admired and who of course quoted Neil Young's song Hey Hey My in his suicide note. Kurt Cobain wrote that line, it's better to burn out than fade away, from Neil Young in his suicide note, and that hit Neil Young quite hard. And this song is about someone who's gone off the rails and maybe he's trying to kill himself or something. I don't totally understand what the lyrics are all about, but they could certainly be inspired by Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. So Sleeps with Angels, not a very long song, it's less than 3 minutes long, but it's lots of warm, very distorted guitars, and I just really like the way it works, and Crazy Horse doing the backing vocals on it as well. And well, you'll have to listen to it yourself and see if it clicks with you. It clicked with me from the start, but maybe it's just me. But anyway, those are my 10 Neil Young hidden gems. I'll put the list below. What do you think? And what are your favourite hidden gems from the Neil Young catalogue? There's just so many great songs, aren't there? So I would love you to put yours, because I might not have heard them. I mean, they may be on some obscure album that I haven't heard, or something on his archives collection that I haven't quite got to yet. So let us know in the comments your Neil Young hidden gems. In the meantime, thanks for watching. We love all your comments. Ben and I will be back with another video very soon. Take care.